guys, welcome to another episode of Gray Hair Garage. So we're starting on the 82 today, starting disassembly, and just want to kind of go over a couple of little things that we're going to address while the car is down. So anyway, let's take a look at some things. So alright guys, let's take a look at things. So we have an 8.8 inch rear axle assembly. We got stainless steel rear brake rotor conversion kit. Now on this exhaust system, kind of one of the things I wanted to do is kind of mimic what the 82 looked like originally. It had the dual outlet on the driver's side. So what I ended up doing, spending some time, as you can see, you can roll over, came around, and so it is actually a true dual. So one of the things we're going to address as we got the car out is these Flowmaster mufflers. I know are at least 30 years old. They're starting to rot from the inside out. I kind of threw this exhaust system together just real quick light to see if I liked the setup. So what I ended up doing, if you can take a look, so we got the ball joints here at the headers. You got an X pipe, go through the muffler, and just as they turn up, you look here, we got V-bands, one on both sides. I could have this exhaust system off in about 10 minutes. It does not take long. Did the same thing on the Capri. I love the way it works. This is the way they should have done it. Anytime they do an aftermarket exhaust system, there's too many joints to leak with most of them with the flow tubes. I don't know, I never did like them. That's old school right there. That's a Ford Motorsport drive shaft. That's probably 30 years old. And then we come right here, and that is one of the first, that is the first version of a Tremec transmission. That is a 3550, and they were great transmissions. They were a excellent alternative to a T5 back in the day. Again, we're talking 30 years ago. Of course, we got BBK headers. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode. We're just basically tearing down and getting ready to do all the modifications. Just want to kind of hit some things while we're here. So like I said, these are some old Flowmasters. When I did this exhaust system, I knew eventually I was going to end up changing them, but I was just building the exhaust system to see if I could even make it go over the axle and both sides dump out like the factory. So it took a little while. It's just a Summit Racing builder's kit, 2.5 inch aluminized pipe with an X pipe, and then a couple of V-bands, and then we've got some stainless steel tips here. Now those I had to I bought some 45s, stainless 45s, and cut them in the curve halfway, and then you know, made the little joggle in it. I don't know if you can tell, but you can kind of see there's the joggle. Yeah, it was the only part I had to make. Yeah, it was a pain, but it worked. And so it looks kind of factory. And that's what I was going after. things I wanted to cover while I had the car up on the lift. Let's go up under here. So there's the center force clutch. They're great clutches. I've run them for many years, but in today's day and age, there's so many clutch manufacturers out there, and there's so many better choices. So in my 70, I went with a spec stage 1. I don't need anything. I'm not building high horsepower. You know, nothing's over 550. So kind of the one thing I don't like about these center force. You hear that? That's kind of why I wanted to do it here. So if you hear my Capri running, you'll hear this little rattling, and you're like, yeah, that thing sounds noisy. Well, that's what you're hearing. And I guess the idea behind this is as RPM and centrifugal force starts moving these out, and what they do is they actually force pressure toward the back and puts more pressure on the pressure plate, which then puts more pressure on the clutch disc, if that makes sense. And so anyway, it's a great clutch, but we're going to end up putting a stage 1 spec in this one. This one does have an aluminum flywheel. It's a Fidanza unit, and what I like about it, we'll discuss that a little bit more, why I run a Fidanza. It just makes life easier if you're running these push rod small block Fords. And one other thing while we're here, let's talk about this spacer plate. Now, I've seen many of people over the years forget to put that in. That is very important. Not only does it space your bell housing out or away from the block, it also is your alignment for the starter here. So you have to put one of those in, and if you don't, you just create a whole lot of drama. So don't forget that. They're pretty cheap. You can still buy them. So yeah, let's keep moving forward. Guys, just wanted to cover a couple things before we carry on. Let's take a good look around this shop. Come with me and take a good look. The reason I bring this up, now granted I probably got a few more cars than most. It's pretty much a disease, but if you look everywhere I've got, there's stuff stored. And this is a 1,200 foot shop, 1,200 square feet. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about was if you decide to build a shop and you think, oh, I only need so much. Well, this is 1,200 square feet. And it doesn't take but a second to fill it up. So if you ever build a shop, whatever you think you might need, double it. Trust me, you'll thank me later. So let's move on to this little 302. So we got it apart. I didn't really show anything as far as cleaning up. I had a big mess to clean up, and so we're just going to tear this thing down. Well, not much to really cover except I guess probably the main thing I want to tell you, especially with these Fox bodies, probably the SN95s also, is anytime you get to the heater hoses, especially if they've been on Think of the ones that go through the firewall on the back side here. I don't know if I can get in there, but you can see them right there on the firewall. Anytime you're taking those heater hoses off, cut them. Trust me, you'll thank me on that one later too. I have cracked the heater core before, and yeah, that's not a fun job. So a couple of issues with this engine. I noticed right off part, you see every one of the headers have been leaking. That's why I don't really like it loud exhaust. It's hard to tell when things like that are going on. And you know, you see all these YouTubers out here putting headers on their new Mustangs and this, that, and the other. Well, and you got that big loud muffler, and yeah, it sounds good and it crackles and pops and all that. Well, let me tell you something about aluminum and exhaust leaks. If you let it go too long, it will eventually erode the surface area. And when it does that, there's no way it's going to seal. So just be mindful when you do all these little hot rod upgrades that y'all are doing to your cars. Be mindful when you bolt the exhaust up. First, make sure you got a good header. Second, make sure you got a good gasket. And also, one thing you really need to do on the flip side of that is if it's one of those composite style gaskets. Let's see if I've got one over here. One, yeah, I do. So if you got a composite style gasket like this is off the exhaust. It's just that type of gasket. Those really, when you tighten them up, you need to heat cycle them a couple of times and then go back and retort the bolts, nuts, whatever. Yeah. That's going to be a fun job on a Coyote. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that. So just be mindful of things like that. This you know, don't want you to learn the hard way like some of us have in our lifetime. But yeah, so here we are, back to Gray Hair Garage. Let's get this thing disassembled, and we'll talk about things as it goes along. Okay, so let's cover a couple of things. If you notice this gasket around the water jacket and the intake port, squeezed out. Same in the back, not quite as bad. Now these intake gaskets had a couple of different raised areas around the water ports. So you have to kind of pay attention as you're assembling an engine. Not only do you have to pay attention to the mechanical side of it, but you also have to pay attention to how the gaskets fit. You know, a lot of people port match stuff, this, that, and the other, but I'm not very pleased with the way these have held up. And this engine doesn't have that many miles on it, and so I'll probably end up trying a different set of gaskets. I'm not real sure. I was kind of disappointed that the bolts were loose, and it's kind of why I talked about the exhaust manifold gaskets or header gaskets, whatever you want to call it. Is anytime you're dealing with composite materials, whether it be intake, exhaust, even the head gasket, when the engine heat cycles a couple, 3 times, you really need to go back and retort those things. I mean, it could have been detrimental. It could have been leaking, just say leaking in this corner and dripping down in the engine, getting antifreeze. And not to mention what I was talking about earlier, exhaust gas will erode the surface of a head. So you guys out there putting those loud exhaust on there, you can't hear that stuff. You know, you may not decide to keep the car, but in the case of mine, where I'm keeping this car till the day I die, I need to, pay attention to these things. One other thing I did, I put this engine together the first time, as you can see, I spent a lot of time. Sorry about that, but I spent a lot of time. But I really want to notice on that one right here. See how that roller tip is off to one side? Now that's not a major issue, but when you bolt up the guide plates, these parts right here, you got your push rods that come up, go up through the guide plates on these style heads because they got screw-in studs. It is imperative that you take your time and make sure that you line this stuff up. Improper valve train will lead to a shortened valve train life. So like I said, even with all the work I did, I'm going to have to go back and do them. Because just because you think you got them right, that shows the story right there. Not a big deal. It's off a little bit. It's still on the tip. But anyway, let's keep going. One other item is, as I was disassembling this thing, I started to notice that if I want to reuse this cam, I need a valve train organizer. So I just ordered one up. So we're going to stop on this part of the process and just go to the bottom and start pulling the water pump, crank pulley off, stuff like that. And we'll just go as far as we can until that tray comes in. And then that way, if I decide to reuse this cam, even if I don't, I'm going to reuse the rockers. I need to kind of match the push rods with the rocker arm. So anyway, let's keep moving forward. Alright guys, let's talk about one little thing and then we're done for today. See those deposits right here? Now this engine's been in the car for about 9 years, somewhere in that neighborhood, and that's the result. I didn't change it. I didn't change the antifreeze. And this is a good point. A lot of people, a lot of these additives, they promise things, and I actually added a quart of water wetter to this system, and it's distilled water and antifreeze fresh. It looked great when it came out, but that's what happens when you don't change the fluids. So yeah, Rich and I talked about this the other day. In his Porsche, he's religious about it, and now that I've seen that, I think I'm going to start being religious about it too. Anyway, hope this helps you guys. Talk to you later.